Morning, Roger here from a snowy Halland-Sawson. Had more snow overnight. Anyway, I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible. I did a short pre-budget and post-budget video yesterday, and this is going to be the last video I do probably until, I don't know, into the summer, because I was waiting for the budget yesterday. I'm waiting for a bit of other data to come in before I get back to the UK and crack on with my business over there. Effectively, I put things on hold for my business midway through February, after thinking long and hard between Christmas and the New Year, when I clocked the figures coming down the pipe from the rate increases, and what was happening in the housing market in the UK, and having followed what had been happening in the US. Of course, the culmination with the US hiking has been the Silicon Valley Bank pop, and Signature Bank pop, and obviously now Credit Suisse have just borrowed 50 billion, which the stock market is taking a bit of a breather from at the moment. I don't think that the problems associated with the rate hikes have settled down. I don't think the Fed or the Bank of England are in control. I think that the commercial banks are in a lot of trouble. I think that the political class, who I call the kakistocracy, are clueless. And this this blog, which I'm just going to run through now, really is just me explaining myself as to why I say that. So the way out of this is for everyone to roll up their sleeves and to keep calm and carry on. Now, how one does that without access to a functioning financial system is really quite difficult. And I include cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, in the dysfunctional economy. The reason I say that is that I got into Ethereum back in 2015, and back then I felt that because it's Hashimoto, which was the hashing algorithm, wasn't actually patented to the NSA, which the Bitcoin hashing algorithm is, and the crypto went wild for a while and stood a chance, but has slowly been reined back in, and it's been a manipulated market since 2017 or 2018. The peaks and troughs, the wild swings are completely insane. We see those in regular markets. The gas market is another insane market where they're all the swings back and forth make no sense whatsoever. It's not economics. It's casino casino gangsterism, really. Anyway, I'm digressing because I do want to try and keep this brief, but I'm going to just go through my thought process on the blog today. So the title of the blog is "What is the Purpose of the Economy?" Now, artificial scarcity, tax farming, and the finance tail wagging the community dog. Now, that is the purpose of the economy as it's driven by the kakistocracy on behalf of the kleptocracy. Now, it shouldn't be that way round. Does the economy have a purpose? Major Douglas, in this first video, which comes up, says, well, yes, it does. The purpose is to produce things so that people can consume them, and people can, as the American Constitution says the pursuit of health, wealth, and happiness. Now, that isn't happening. The budget yesterday that Hunt gave, he talked about productivity. Productivity by whose measure, on which terms, over what time scale? If you look back to the 1930s, times and motion studies and the notions of productivity were invented quelle surprise by an academic, a business consultant, with connected to the Chicago School of Economics, and it's pseudo made up science. Now, rather than digressing all the time, I'll make that claim, I'll stick to that claim, and if anyone has any comments or wants to challenge that claim, I'm quite happy to track back through and actually give the citations for who invented times and motion studies, whereabouts they did that research, and then how they were applied and how subsequently they were discredited. And yet so much discredited stuff of that nature worms its way back into the neoclassical, neoliberal economic thinking, debunking the thing of the age, the fact checkers. Who's fact checking the fact checkers? Moving swiftly on to the next video here. What I've done is given the setup of this blog, a comedy twist on the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, or hypothesis, thesis, hypothesis, synthesis, problem, reaction, solution. Harry Enfield in This Is I Saw You Coming. It's very short, it's only a minute long. My speaker doesn't come through this microphone, so I'm not going to play it, but if you're following the blog, want to pause the video and just watch that, the link to the blog is in the description. Then we come to the reaction, the narrative. Well, the problems, the narratives for the problems. This is a chopped up bit of video from Idiocracy, and the narrative is this insane? And so the narrative posited by the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer yesterday, it ignores the question, what is the purpose of the economy, and is completely out of touch with any sense of reality. One thing they did say yesterday was about nuclear power and base load in the electricity grid, and actually including nuclear power as sustainable. Now, without arguing the whys and wherefores of that, I did a blog about energy and about good carbon and bad carbon as regards the carbon-based economy, the CO2 narratives. And in that blog, I looked at what you included in as far as good carbon and bad carbon went, and there was a bit of a row in the EU about whether to include nuclear or not. Well, I think it's sensible that it is, because we need all the energy that we can get, including from hydrocarbons, which some people call fossil fuels. And a bit further down the blog, I'm going to explain why I've gone nerdily into energy intensity ratios and energy return or energy invested, and the whole idea of peak oil and scarcity. Artificial scarcity is one of the hashtags in the title. And then the next video then is, what is the purpose of the economy? And this is part of an excellent YouTube channel which explains the concepts of social credit, put forward by Major Douglas, which are very sensible and a good starting point on actually building things, actually putting something that does work in place. I mean, I'm a great believer in the old aphorism, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it is broke. Is it fixable, the debt-based money system? Well, a few tweaks here or there could work better, but looking at, from the ground up, this is a very good way of just asking questions, to set out on a journey of tackling the idiocy of people like Jeremy Hunt, the present UK Chancellor of the Exchequer. So I did a blog on 4th of March, about Major Douglas social credit, and distributive political economy. Distributism is something which was promoted by two gentlemen, G.K. Chesterton, who people have heard of, is quite a famous author, and another guy called Hilaire Belloc, who was a public intellectual back in the day. And distributism and social credit are kind of related. So this next paragraph comes from a LaRouche document, or it's actually an Australian outfit who are, I think they're part of the LaRouche movement, as it were. These people here, CEC. Now, people say all sorts of things about them. They're right wing, they're this, they're that. People say all sorts of things about Lyndon LaRouche. I mean, I tend to want to read what they've written and then make up my own mind. Now, this idea that LaRouche really does major on is the British system versus the American system, and the American system is one of prosperity through commerce, along the lines of a political economy posited by a guy called Henry Carey. And Henry Carey, his best friend, or one of his best friends, a guy called Erasmus Peashine Smith, who had a lot of influence on Japan in the late 1870s. And that's what this is about. And and so this paragraph here, the second law of thermodynamics is a fraud. Now that will shock a lot of people to see that as a headline there. Any climate warrior will, say, oh, you obviously don't know the second law of thermodynamics or whatever. Again, I don't want to get into this. I did a very long blog arguing against Admiral Titley's claim that he hadn't got religion on the heat transfer equation. Now, the point about quite a lot of science is that it's posited within boundary conditions, and once you get outside of those boundary conditions, all hell can break loose. And so you have to be honest about how far you go with your claims. And the idea of science is that you narrow things down, and then when you make a claim, it's very specific, very, very precise. So in terms of empirical scientific truth claims, it involves a similar sort of precision to the linguistic precision that's required in stating legal principles, or man-made laws, as it were. Now, so that's it's worth reading the whole of that document. It will challenge certain held beliefs. Like I'm a great when I read Unto This Last by this here. Right, this is going very slow now. Anyway, onto this last famous series of 4 essays, which Gandhi translated into Urdu, and if you read the Urdu translated back into English, you get an interesting take on that. John Ruskin is the guy that wrote it, and this paper here talks about Ruskin being part of the Round Table school of thought, and Cecil Rhodes, and a lot of stuff to do with the British Empire and all the rest of it. Now, getting into the politics and the tribalism of all of this, I think unto this last is a particularly brilliant collection of essays. Now, and they stand up as they are, and the fact that John Ruskin was who he was doesn't, we have to be very careful in all these things not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that works both ways. And so my approach to these things is sort of an integral approach where I'm looking at all quadrants, all levels. That's a reference to a guy called Ken Wilber and a thing called Integral Philosophy. Now, so anyway, that's the first sort of this source here. The basic point here is the American way of doing things, a pragmatic sort of commercial capitalism, as opposed to the British way of doing things. We call that the neoliberal way, the classical liberal way, and it's a sort of a where money is the thing, and the American way where production and a pragmatic sort of roll up your sleeves, get on and do it way of doing things. And now calling that the American system is it doesn't mean that's only ever happened in America and that people in Britain didn't exist that wanted that. So conflating a people or countries with what their governments do or what their ruling class are doing at any particular time is a layer that has to be peeled away. And so in meeting this information, if you meet it for the first time, it's kind of worth reading that. There's a book published of Carey's letters to the London Times, and it's worth reading because he argues in real time with the people pushing things like the triangular trade, which is one of the causes of the Great Hunger in Ireland, for instance. So anyway, so yeah, moving on next. This is a poem I wrote called The Tides of the Petrodollar Moon, which is looking at bimaterialism, but also looking at getting money in the real economy. So silver was the money of the common man, etc. And petrodollar hegemony, access to credit creation, all the rest of it. Who gets that newly minted money? It's all wrapped up in that. And then this is a brilliant essay that Richard Werner had published in The Conversation UK, which Wes Freeberg had in his Twitter feed the other day. Brilliant essay, and it really is worth the time reading that. And then episode 2 of the Douglas thing here then is what is money? Where does it come from? And then after that, this was a quiz that was done by Positive Money many years ago before they got hijacked by the Green Fascists. And the Positive Money quiz is a good starting point of learning about money. This guy here, John Hoeffler, was the I don't know, chief researcher of of the LaRouche organization. Another guy that had a similar sort of job there was a guy called Wesley Tarpley. But again, it's worth reading. And then I contrast these quotes from a book called Climate Crisis Economics, which is a terrible book, absolutely rubbish. I read it. And this Attenborough Thunberry plan, blah, blah, blah. And then in 2021, the LaRouche organization brought out this document, The Great Leap Backward. And there's a link to it there in the cloud, and you can download that and have a read. I say here, Macintosh's brand of green fascism has emerged fully now from behind the curtain. Let the discussion of the facts and the science commence. And during the height of the pandemic, with all the Klaus Schwab stuff and all the rest of it, this is a mock-up poster I made, Covid-Troika, the Yawning Heights. Well, there we are. So this is the blog I did yesterday, Flux d'Etat, part 2, Central Bank Coup d'Etat, Central Bank Balance Sheet Pandemic, which I did in October the 3rd, 2021. Covid-Troika, it's a digital bank passport, not a vaccine passport, QED. Catherine Austin Fitz appeared on Tucker Carlson on Fox News a couple of nights ago, very recently, and her work with Solari Group, John Titus's work is in there. Again, she mentions the black budgets, the criminality in the establishment, both at a government and corporate level, civil society level. Another person that's been looking at that recently is a guy called Brendan O'Connell III, and he has been working with a guy called Mike Hill. Mike Hill has exposed in New Hampshire various alleged wrongdoing. It reminded me of Mike Rupert challenging John Deutz back in the mid-70s about the CIA being involved in drugs in Los Angeles, where he was in the police department at the time. Mike Rupert then became a 9/11 whistleblower along with Richard Groves, who they both identified dodgy insider dealing pre 9/11, and of course dodgy insider dealing is kind of part and parcel of the thing these days. There was dodgy insider dealing in the run up to the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, etc. So then this going direct to backwardation. Backwardation is it's basically where the spot price of oil and the future price of oil are out of whack with each other, and the price of oil is manipulated. It's not a market price, and the whole circus around how we think the economy works, the idea that you've got this free market in anything, it's just really naive. Severe oil backwardation is here. It's not all bad for stocks. So this is an article in Barron's, which is a energy-based kind of, they publish all that sort of stuff about oil production and things. I did this blog, Do the Contango Backwardation to Monopoly. Contango is is one state of futures contracts and oils, and backwardation is another state. And then I talk about selling your store, sold to the company's store, and Ardha makes an appearance here. So this is the carbon rationing passport. And then I blurted out here: Procrustean modelling and policy-based evidence-making, a trial of style over substance, and the blind led by the blind, circular and inductive reasoning, a failure to check and recheck premises. And then this is a quote here from a book that came out in the 1960s. The position was well put indeed in a famous speech by Jubzel to the graduates of Central Saturnian University, when he said that it was a source of great pride to him that although hardly anybody knew anything any longer, everybody now knew how to find out everything. Price, was it the value of price of everything, the value of nothing, is a famous Oscar Wilde quote. And I did a blog here: I will be your rock of ages, look me up in yellow pages, when big data fooled the world, hard ha, central bank digital currencies. And central bank digital currencies are the thing. Where's this all leading? Where are we headed? We're headed towards central banks eating the commercial banks' lunch, further centralization, going large on centralization, and command and control Soviet style economies. It's the way the EU has been going, this blockist view, this whole, it's kind of where, you know, it is where this is headed, and it's a bad place to be headed. And you know, this time won't be different. This has been ongoing since through the 80s and then the early 90s, when Ross Perot ran for president in the United States and said there'd be a great big sucking sound. The TTP, the TTIP, the interstate settlement treaty, all of these things, they weren't playing well in democratic forums, and so they're all being done behind the back door. And our democracy is alive in name only, and we've got to get it back. We've got to get it back quick. So then, as my example of this circular reasoning and self-referencing thing, we come then to energy intensity ratios and EROI, and this guy's called Kerry King. This is a paper he wrote in 2010, and the bit of this paper which I've been fond of quoting is this bit here. This lack of volatility can possibly be attributed to the Texas Railroad Commission acting as an oil cartel by pro-rationing oil production in Texas from 1935 to 1973 to create a price floor for balancing supply and demand. Him then quoting Prindle in 1981, with Texas as the swing state oil producer until peak production in 1970. This balancing on the price was possible. Well, post 73, obviously your OPEC came along, and they became the swing price producer. So it's a continuation of hostilities against the public by other means, or the same means with a different name. That's another good quote from Galbraith. That is that most of the innovations in finance are a different name for the same thing. So then getting into this energy intensity ratio and ERIO and whatever, I've highlighted this table here. It says like the US energy intensity ratios for natural gas, coal and oil show cyclical behavior, and all indicators were decreasing after 2003, right? So after 2003, but lo and behold, this is written in 2010. If we actually get to Carey's book, The Economic Superorganism, here's that graph carried on. So, right, the annual energy return on energy invested of US oil and natural gas compared to the energy intensity ratio of US oil, gasoline, electricity. Right, proxies for the ROI. Where are we? Right, oil gas calculations, oil, gasoline, electricity price data. Now, let's just go back up here, so signal behavior, all indicators were decreasing after 2003. Okay, all indicators decreasing after 2003. Hey presto, after 2003, it's still cyclical. They start going up again, and then they start coming down again. Now, what this is actually showing is that the initial hypothesis has been falsified. So this is Hall and Carey and all the rest of it, when they're saying that it's getting more expensive to reach new oil, and therefore the degrowth is inevitable, the crash is inevitable, and that we're running out of stuff, and it just isn't true. And so if you follow this through, so when I challenged Tim Morgan on the Seeds blog about this, he has never answered, and that's because he can't. And whether he's gone into these figures or not, I don't know. It's just something he's chosen to believe, and built a whole theory and church, the Church of Seeds, around that, with various people who like his story, and he's a good storyteller. So that's why that's all here, and it's based on modelling. So some other, here he is. Here's his Twitter thing, Carey W. King, so this is another paper of his where he's talking about taking data and it's hybridized, it's stylized data, and it's imputed. It sets up a series of hypotheses which aren't really refutable by evidence. It's not empirical, it's modeled, and the modeling is questionable. And where else have we seen questionable modeling giving us problems? Well, the modeling of the R number for the COVID pandemic, but also the modeling, climate change. And this then gets back to, as well as the American system and the British system, you have the idealism against realism in a philosophical sense. You have the determinism versus free will in the philosophical sense, and what David Graeber called the underside of the Western tradition, which is the dispute between Heraclitus and Parmenides, which is between determinism and free will, which is also realism against idealism, and this idea that if it doesn't work in theory, it shouldn't work in practice. Have you got a good theory to go with that? Have you got an algorithm for that? And unfortunately, it's anti-empiricism, and so in other broad schools of thought, this is Platonism against Aristotelianism, and how Alex Thompson has two excellent talks about that cleavage between these two broad philosophical schools of thought. And the problem that we face is that they're both elitist, and they both despise common people. And so the quote that comes to mind from this is Salenga quoting Calvin, "The poor must remain poor so that they remain obedient." And that then takes us back to the birth of the British system and the founding of the Bank of England, which was a Puritan operation founded by a guy called John Boublon, I think he was called, who was a Huguenot immigrant. And the speech yesterday from Hunt, was straight out of that playbook. The Protestant work ethic. We believe in work. I believe in a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. This is not something that they do believe in, and they've got this idea of productivity. But their measures of productivity have got a thumb on the scale. So they make these theories up, and everybody has to believe the theories. And if you don't believe the theories, then you're excluded, or not given access to the monetary unit that's kept scarce. And this is it takes us then back to the purpose of the economy and what's money and Major Douglas, etc. Now, Mark Blythe is an academic working in the States, and he's part of this group of public intellectuals, including Yanis Varoufakis, including Kerry King. Kerry King retweeted Mark Blythe, who said, he's not going to say anything about SVB Bank because, analysis takes a bit longer and he doesn't really know what's happening. And then that leads us into Kerry King's book's actually quite a good book. It is worth reading. I'm not saying it's right, but it is worth reading, and it's a good one to have a read and argue with. Whereas this Macintosh book is just absolute rubbish. If I only had time to read one or other, I've read both. But if I only had time to read one or other, I'd read the Carey book because it's a much better book. This guy is just a charlatan, whereas Carey, I think he's just wrong. So then we come to seeds falsified, and that's what all that is about. But a lot of this idealism, a lot of these ideas which are founded in what LaRouche calls the British system, are just plain wrong. And so a couple of blogs, and then money, you say Aryans, I say Aryans. Aryans is Welsh for money. Inflation, who benefits? Tim Morgan's Seeds Falsified, Life After Liberalism, posted September the 13th, 2022. Cessation of growth changes everything. And Tim was banging on yet again about EROI, and it's not fit for policy making. It's not substantiated. In fact, far from being it's falsified. Never give up on a good thing. Again, I've said this. Keep polishing the monopoly turd. And then this is from an earlier discussion on the Seeds blog back in the day. Global Financial Crisis 2, Ephemeralization, Doing More with Less, Bucky Fullmeister and the Circular Economy. So again, a caution against throwing the baby out with the bathwater. CO2 as a proxy for energy use in the economy, it's not a bad measure for knowing how much money or how much oil you need in the engine, as it were. Wesley Freeberg has an abstract measure called quanta that he argues is superior to that, and he may well be right. But the point is, there are lots of other ways of doing it which are far superior to the abstract, free floating exchange rate, which is arbitrary. Who I call the ethos of debt. So the central bankers, it's what they say. It's not which can be done on a whim, or it can be done to favour one group over another. It's not uninfluenced. And I go a step further than that. It is absolutely rigged. And then a lot of these people who tend to be determinists and control freaks also tend to feel that there's an overpopulation problem. I guess they look at it the world, if you disagree with them, then you should be on the list of to be euthanized, as it were. But this is a short paper I wrote, which was the culmination of a rebuttal of a paper that a guy called I think Stephen Kurtz kept going on about on the Seeds blog. I noticed he hasn't commented recently on there. The last comment I found he made was 12th of December last year. I don't know if there's been some falling out there or whatever. He's still active on Twitter, so he's still with us. But this thing here, often I will just do a notebook post or a general, here's my thinking in general, and then I get on and do my own knitting. I'm not a preacher. The only people I try to persuade to do anything is my business partners and investors, in terms of the business plans and what we should be doing in terms of cutting our cloth in the market going forward. The blogging is a notebook for me, but occasionally I will write something a bit more coherent, and that was one of the things. And seeds is something, climate change is something I got into, and I've written a few bits and pieces on that. But anyway, and then this is a very well produced rebuttal of carbon dioxide as a control knob. Now, it's not a control knob, but it is actually a very good proxy for so actually a carbon-based currency or carbon doesn't bother me. I prefer something more broadly based, but energy's the thing. I mean, energy's where it's at. So hey, why not? But it's why not? But what for? And the what for with these Apollonian ghouls, as I call them, or have been known to call them, they want to ration carbon based on a myth of scarcity, and it's a good way of thinning the herd in their book. And I disagree with that. I think their arguments are soundly debunked. Early on, a bigger charlatan, it's harder to think of one. Anyway, but this is a very good structured critique of that. There are lots of others, but that one's just particularly nice, and it's quite short. If you're new to doubting the strictures of our higher ups and all the rest of it, it's a good starting point. Right. So House Builder magazine came out, bugger all in the budget, some enterprise zones and stuff like that. And this is why I'll be back in the UK in a week or two and have my sleeves rolled up, trying to figure, well, I'm not in the market for taking any big risks at the moment, but there's always something to be done. We pulled out of our last big deal halfway through February. We were going to build 300 houses in Wales, but it just became untenable. Both the funding markets, the prospects of selling them, the way we build quite quickly, and it's the outlook is very, very uncertain. So I mean, my current thinking is actually to actually do more, become a contractor, as opposed to a skin in the game developer. That kind of makes quite a lot of sense at the moment, using our skill set in that direction. But it's after 3 months of really racking my brains to come up with that's a simple strategy. And it sounds so simple, but just to get to that point, I don't have sleepless nights. I don't tend to lose sleep, but I've had consumed waking hours going over things back and forth. Sort of, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a businessman. What do you do? Where do you position yourself in this chaos? It's a really hard question. But anyway, I digress. So my take on the budget was it's another nothing burger from a kakistocratic shower. So I like this guy on Twitter, Finance Lancelot, Knights of the Round Table. And so a couple of his tweets here. It's quite interesting insider dealing here. Relief to know the Fed officials were forced to sell their stock holdings for ethical reasons in September 2021. And this is an interview from the, I'm not sure if that's The Big Short, where they interviewed a bunch of people. And this guy has stuff to say, which is quite shocking stuff. Expiration of the options window, etc. So OPEX. I suspect that's it sounds terribly cynical, but I think it's probably right. Cost of greed crisis, Unite Union. I think the cost of greed crisis is actually a really good way of framing it rather than the cost of living crisis. UK budget today, a report from Airstrip 1, Oceania versus East Asia. It's on the budget. The Treasury kakistocracy and the kleptocracy, ESG bandits of the green fascist mafia. The budget is basically the Looters Manifesto, austerity for thee and me. And then this was the video. I did one pre, one post budget, just on my sort of initial reaction. And Melissa Kume here, who says their eyes on Credit Suisse as their credit default swaps hit record highs. Big money flowing in to insurance protection, anticipating a collapse. They got a short-term loan in the meantime, but maybe the focus will turn to Deutsche Bank. It's really, really rough out there, suffice to say. So here's an interview with Melissa Kume, which is well worth looking at. The Irish Inquiry explains the why of Event 201. That was my title. Event 201 is what I call the pandemic, because basically Event 201, you may as well watch that and you've seen it. If you'd watched that before, we may as well not have had it. Now, here's Webster Tarpley, Ecoscience, John Holdren, who's a mucker of Elric, etc. Ecoscience is Tarpley's comprehensive demolition of their Club of Rome limits to growth population bomb nonsense. His Tarpley appeared on the Alex Jones show in 2012. I watched Alex Jones last night, and he was talking a lot about the British system and the LaRouche type stuff. He's got a lot of knowledge on all of this stuff, and I don't really care what political dog he's got in the fight, one way or the other. Same with Brendan O'Connell and all the rest of it. He knows a lot of stuff, and if you're not listening to people that you don't necessarily instinctively agree with, you've stopped thinking. Melissa Kume, on the other hand, I find a great deal of agreement with her position on things, anyway, so that's that. Kill the Messenger. That's a film by Sibel Edmonds. It's on my BitChute channels called Tone Freaks. The really good ones always end up hanging. I think the URLs get blackballed in, with the Google algorithms. So this August the 6th, August the 5th, July 31st, July 30th, July 13th, July 9th. So this is last summer 2022. I went through, obviously was having a bit of a quiet patch, and these are at that particular point in time. These are things that occurred to me that I just put up on my BitChute. Guide for Perplexes, a talk by Bernard Laitier, Why We Need a Monetary Ecosystem, a talk he gave in 2015, which is very much worth listening to. It's an extract from the 1983 film Ghost Dance, which resounded with me first time I read it. This is Gordon Brown and Tony Blair back in '93 on C-SPAN. So this is prior to the '97 election of the Blair government. And then here's Ross Perot, Giant Sucking Sound, Don't Get Fooled Again. That's a video I made a few years ago before Donald Trump got elected. Here's a quote from Michael Ruppert. It's organized crime. All you do is call the Republicans the Genoveses, and you call the Democrats the Gambinos. The people at the top, they treat it like a crap game. It's their crap game, like they're making lots of money. Occasionally somebody at the table shoots each other, but the moment anything threatens their crap game, they all unite to protect it. They're both controlled by the same financial, economic, and corporate interests. Nothing to argue about with there. This was a video that David Malone did called Waiting for Something Bad to Happen, which is well worth listening to. And also all of the, in that video, there are a bunch of links to the sources, some of the quotes that David's given there. Right, so here we are. Professor Steve Keen, got to go and see this. He produced something that was written by Michael Hudson. Michael Hudson, I must say, I do like his work. Steve Keen, I like some of his work. I don't like his new direction so much. He's got religion on climate or whatever. Suffice to say, Hudson's still okay by my book, even though he worked for the Hudson Institute, and Hudson, the guy that founded that, was involved in founding the WF and all the rest of it. A guy called Herman Cohn. Johnny Vedmore's gone on about him. Again, you can't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater and all of this stuff. Same with Kissinger. And I'm going to show something in a minute, which just on the baby bathwater thing. Then we come back summing up again. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Harry Enfield, Saw You Coming, Stupidlosophy. Jerome Powell in Idiocracy, and then Does the Economy Have a Purpose? And it's a can of worms. It doesn't do what it says on the can. This is no longer Kansas, etc., etc. And wealth is strangling our concentrated wealth is strangling our prosperity. And this is a chart published back in 2014, which is quite shocking, and it's worse now. Paul Craig Roberts, a blog of his saying the economy is broken. There we are. I say it's a can of worms. It doesn't do as it says on the tin. There's the full Idiocracy movie, full Brazil movie, full movie Thorium, the wrong face of nuclear, Fortunes of War, etc. And then we end up with Dutch Farmers, the Dutch Farmers Party, are going to be the largest party in the Dutch Parliament. That's great news. Let's see where we go from here. People have noticed a lot of this stuff. You just won't, you won't read about it in the paper. And the Dutch story, farmer story, which is on the BBC website, is under climate change, not under politics, which I found quite interesting. So that's that. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, in terms of this idea of throwing the baby out of the bathwater, what's that crashed? There it is. Right. Okay. Right, these are a whole bunch of ebooks that I've got on my computer. Kerry King, Economic Superorganism. Age of Folly, America Abandons Its Democracy by Lewis Lapham. That's a Disrupt a Broken Industry, the Industrial Construction Sandbox. That's a business thing. The Fear Index by Robert Harris. The Housing Boom and Bust by Thomas Sowell. Napoleon of Notting Hill, G.K. Chesterton. Business as a System of Power, Douglas Dowd. Arthur Kitson, Money. Collected works of Fergus Hume. Essays on Geopolitics, That Matter, What's Next, Ian Brimner and Douglas Rediker. The Culture Cold War, Francis Stoner Saunders. Robert Zubrin, Merchants of Despair. Cold Fusion, The Secret Energy Revolution, Anthony G. Sutton. Walden 2 Follow-Up, News from Nowhere, B.F. Skinner. Green Fraud, Why the Green New Deal is Even Worse Than You Think, Mark Morano. A Climate Crisis, Patrick Allett, a provocative history of the environmental movement in America, showing how this rise to political and social problem has produced a culture of alarmism that has often distorted the facts. That's Merchants of Despair again. Suicide of the West, James Burnham. The Age of Acquiescence, Steve Fraser, a groundbreaking investigation of how and why, from the 18th century to the present day, American resistance to our ruling elites has vanished. From the American Revolution through the Civil Rights Movement, Americans have long mobilized against political, social, and economic privilege. Hierarchies based on inheritance, wealth, and political preferment were treated as obnoxious and a threat to democracy. Mass movements envisioned a new world, supplanting dog-eat-dog capitalism, but over the last half-century, that political will and cultural imagination have vanished. Why? The Age of Acquiescence seeks to solve that mystery. Steve Fraser's account of national transformation brilliantly examines the rise of American capitalism, the visionary attempts to protect the democratic Commonwealth, and the great surrender to today's delusional fables of freedom and politics of fear, effervescent and razor sharp. The Age of Acquiescence will be one of the most, etc. Global Governance in the 20th Century, Michael Chadwick. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Blowback, Chalmers Johnson. Whom the Gods Would Destroy, F. William Engdahl. Myths, Lies and Oil Wars, William Engdahl. The Growth Illusion, Richard Douthwaite. Calling bullshit. It's not just fake news, bullshit is everywhere. Now 2 science professors give us the tools to dismantle misinformation and think clearly in a data-saturated world. The world is awash in bullshit, and we're drowning in it. Politicians are unconstrained by facts. Science is conducted by press release. Startup culture elevates bullshit to high art these days. Calling bullshit is a noble art. Based on Carl Bergstrom and Jevin West's popular course at the University of Washington, Calling Bullshit is a modern handbook to the art of skepticism. Bergstrom, a computational biologist, and West, an information scientist, catalogue bullshit in its many forms, explaining and offering readers the tools to see through the obfuscations, deliberate and careless that dominate every realm of our lives. They instruct readers to ask, who is saying it? How do they know? What do they have to gain by persuading me? Very good. Vaclav Smil, Power Density. Right, okay. Numbers Don't Lie, Vaclav Smil. Grand Transitions, Vaclav Smil. King of Capital, David Carey and Johnny Morris. The untold story of Steve Schwarzman and Blackstone, the financier and his financial powerhouse that avoided the self-destructive tendencies of Wall Street. David Carey and John Morris show how Blackstone and other private equity firms transformed themselves from gamblers, hostile takeover artists, and barbarians at the gate into disciplined, risk-conscious investors. The financial establishment, banks and investment bankers such as Citigroup, Bear Stearns, Lehman, UBS, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley were the cowboys, recklessly assuming risk, leveraging up to astronomical levels, and driving the economy to the brink of disaster. Blackstone is now ready to break out once again, since it is sitting on billions of dollars that can be invested at a time when the market is starved of capital. There you go, going direct. Joel Kotkin, The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. Right, Henry Kissinger, World Order. Let's just okay. Okay, so let us read. Oh, let's go to the end. Reflections on the character of nations and the course of history. Right, let's have a little look at what R. Henry is saying here. Sorry, I must reread this. Anyway, it will be worth reading. Let's just get back here, shall we? Oh, we're on Vaclav Smil, Power Density, Kotkin, there's R. Henry. Tim Jackson, Prosperity Without Growth. Okay, so that's an example of me reading something which I don't agree with the person that's written it. But you have to read to find out what they're saying. Gaming the vote, William Poundstone. Our electoral system is fundamentally flawed, and there's a simple and fair solution. At least 5 US presidential elections have been won by the second most popular candidate. The reason was a spoiler, a minor candidate who takes enough votes away from the most popular candidate. Interesting. Big Secrets, William Poundstone. The book that gives the inside story on hundreds of secrets of American life. Jonah Goldberg, Liberal Fascism. The Price of Panic, how the tyranny of experts turned the pandemic into a catastrophe. The Octopus, Charlie Robinson. AIDS. The bad news is recreational drugs and medical treatments like AZT do. The good news is HIV doesn't cause it. There you go. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. Ian McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary. Conquest of Doe, Roger Lewis. Philosophy, Roger Lewis. Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Forgery. Report from Iron Mountain, Leonard C. Lewin. Another forgery. Handbook of Monetary Economics, North Holland. Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, Patrick M. Wood. Anyway, those are a selection of e-books which are on this hard drive. So, right, we're going to wrap up now in a second. Let me just see where we're up to here. StreamYard, okay, we're still going. And Farmers Protest Party win shock Dutch vote victory. That's really good news. I mean, that's as big as Brexit, frankly. Well done, those guys. So, right, here we go. This is LibGen, so you can download lots of ebooks from LibGen. The Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto. Okay, I left that there just to say that. And where are we? Right, this is The Insanely Concentrated Wealth is Strangling Our Prosperity by Stephen Roth. And this is from back in 2014. And you can see this graph here. Bottom visible pink line is the top 10%. Visible top line, right, okay. And then the top 0.1% is this red line here. And the 0.00001%, which is the billionaire class, obviously is out of sight. Most people, when they see that wealth distribution, are fairly shocked, and it's worse now than it was then. Secular stagnation in the US, a wealth concentration increases, velocity declines. Wealth share of the top 0.1% since 1978, and the velocity of wealth, here are results: growth in inflation-adjusted GDP per capita. Now, this is all explained away by Tim Morgan as, well, that's because oil is running out or getting more expensive. There's not so much surplus energy. It's absolute rubbish. This is the problem. This is the problem right here. All of this dweebish arithmetic, of course, doesn't put across the real crux of the thing. Power, money is power. So it is, so it has been, and so it shall be in our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes, world without end. Amen. This is especially true for minorities who have been so thoroughly screwed by our recent great whatever. Money is the power to walk away from a shitty job, to hire fancy lawyers and lobbyists, maybe even buy yourself a politician or two. If we want minorities to have power, they need to have money. Add to that dignity and respect, which is deserved by every child born. Sadly but truly, they are delivered to those who have money. You can bemoan that reality, but in the meantime, let's concentrate on the money. If you want to create a workers' utopia, a better world for all, seize the wealth and income. September the 18th, 2017. Evonomics. Right, so quick look here. Right, this is the government 10-year bond forecast summary. Right, this is the markets. Here's the bond market here. What's the time? 1:10 in midday. So it's still 7 o'clock in New York, so they're not open yet over there. I don't think they will be anyway. Let's have a quick look here. Yeah, they're still closed over there. So bond market year on year it's up 1.8, monthly it's down 0.1, and weekly it's down 0.38. Are the Bank of England going to cut next week? Right. Stock market, you see here, FTSE 100 is up 0.75%, down nearly 6% on the week, 7.25% on the month, but up on the year. Commodities. Now this is interesting. I was looking at this earlier. Just look at this. Year on year on commodities, crude oil down 30%, Brent down 28%, natural gas down nearly 50%, gasoline down 23%. Everything is down. Gold is up. Well, it's slightly down year on year. So is silver. Lithium is down. Titanium is down. Wheat, lumber. Right, so orange juice is up. Potatoes are up. Millennium is up. I don't even know what that is. Urea ammonium, urea diammonium down quite a lot. Haven't got potash on it, have they? Soda ash. Eggs up a lot in the US. You look at that, and you know that inflation at the retail end of the spectrum, which obviously has seemed to have peaked. We're headed for Armageddon here. I mean, it had gone up a lot, and so what goes up must come down, and all the rest of it. But right, where are we? All right, so this is this. What is this stuff? Let's just find out what that is. Co-vaccine by the body required for the function of 4 enzymes. chemical element symbol, atomic number 42, located in period 5 group 7 million. Application alloys. Okay, using structural stainless steel, super alloys. Okay, there we are. That's what that is, and it's expensive at the moment. It's been going up. Right, so what else have we got here? Did we get to the end of that blog? We did. We got to the Dutch farmers, didn't we? Okay. Right, I'm going to wrap it up there then. That's about the size of it. Do have a read of this Great Leap Backwards, and you know, people face biggest fall in spending power for 70 years. It's just not on. There's absolutely no need for it, and we just saw the big graph, this big graph here. That's the problem. And right, what else have we got here now? Moody's warns of more pain for US banks as downgraded sectors. A day ago, comments. What are the people saying about this? Let's have a look. HPC appears to have rescued the UK RSB at no cost to UK taxpayers. A good move. Well, you don't know what the cost is going to be just yet. They paid £1 for it, but right. So these are the highest rated. Oldest. Wrote the rules. Seems lessons haven't been learned since the 2008 crash. Light touch regulation doesn't work. Regulators should be stepping in and enforcing what banks. Yep. Most replied. Tory bank chums. Okay. Highest rated. Free marketers love the free market until it doesn't work for them, then they demand bailouts at the expense of the rest of us. A Venn diagram of free marketers and hypocrites is a perfect circle. There we are. So it's rare to get comments on the BBC these days, so it's usually worth having a little look. And where are we then? Okay, Per Karowski, recommend looking at his blogs. He's been writing about all this shit that's been going on for years now. He's an ex-director of the World Bank. He knows what he's talking about. Right. So Peter Hitchens is still going on about what he's going on about. Peter Oban, remarkable testimony, Casey person, Labour files, Ranjan, FIFA. Right, Mark Windows talking about stuff he was banging on about for years before almost anyone else now happening. That is the ultimate praise, really. So the Talk from Cork, Windows on the World, jolly good. It's better to have your nose in a book than in someone else's business. Amen. If the banking system is safe and resilient, as we've been constantly assured by the government, then the regulators move sets dangerous exposure. Right, now that reminds me, let me just have a look. Comments BBC. We've just been looking at some BBC content, so I'm going to actually wrap up on a blog I did. There are lots of those. Let's just refine that. I'm just going to bear with me, please. Here we go. BBC comments. Right, okay. Open a link. And that one there. We've just finished with these ones. So, okay. Manx Austrian economics. The banking tale has driven the bankster dog mad. Tails wagging dogs, conquest of dough. So, okay. So, Banking Commission wants firewall around retail banking. So this is 12th of April 2011. Robin Joy wrote, I find your comment interesting. Have you considered that ultimately so-called investment banking relies on the concept, and concept is what it is, of debt money. That is a money supply based on a system values that are accepted by fiat, not the Italian car giant, as currency. We as the general population accept this debt money, and it is the fact that we can exchange it for food and shelter that we accept it in payment for our work. At the most fundamental level, investment banking needs retail banking and the debt money fractional reserve system that is licensed by those who govern us. It has been this way, more or less, from the time of George I. There is a rather overblown and pompous tail, investment banking, wagging a once proud and loyal dog. Just about everyone else, including the extinct breed of wonderful, hard-working executive branch bank managers in business. My first bank manager was called Bill Turner. He worked for NatWest in the West Ferry Road branch in the East End of London. He was pensioned off in the mid-90s. Now, although considered cruel in some circles, you really want to dock the tail of your gun dog. Time to dock the tail of the banking system. Without docking the tail, the dog will be destroyed, having been driven half mad. In this case, it may well be that this dog has to be destroyed and we will have to train another one. Collection of posts on the BBC. So you used to be able to make quite long posts on the BBC, and they cracked down on it. So do banks use billions in subsidy wisely? 14th of April 2011. Hello, Spike. I think that you're in danger of mixing up some apples and pears and oranges here. The basic system at the end of the day is pretty easy to understand, as was its intended purpose when adopted as our means of exchange. The banks were allowed to issue debt money licensed by the government, regulated by the Bank of England, with some other watchdogs. The banks engaged in two overarching fields, retail and investment banking. It is their retail function that allows them to engage in their investment function. It is the retail function that gives their debt money its value because of the confidence that its customers have in that debt money to buy goods and services. What happens next is not dissimilar to the concept of float in the insurance and reinsurance business. For an excellent explanation of float, go to almost any Warren Buffett letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders. When people like Lord Rothschild put this down in part to a failure of regulation and management, he is of course correct, as he is on so many things. What he is incorrect about is that any flexibility in the banking system with respect to fractional reserves is not sustainable as a model for society as a whole. As a means of exchange, it is both expensive and unfair to the bank's customers, who are, after all, both the government and the people, who are supposed to be the same thing, broadly speaking. The banks are creating money from nothing, secured against our own wealth, and lending it back to us as coin of the realm. Sounds a bit far-fetched. What is investment banking if not the innovation division of the fractional reserve side of the banking industry? It is there to find ways around the very sensible limits imposed by regulation, to the extent to which banks can create money and make it disappear literally with a stroke of a pen. Most of what is created remains in a loop that never gets into the real economy. Quantitative easing, the missing billions, look at the loop and connect things like record profits being reported now, all coming from investment banking. What are they investing in exactly? Answer in their own merry-go-round, some likening it to a roulette wheel. Personally, putting that power in the hands of a few private organisations run by people clearly motivated by quite extraordinary levels of greed seems to me to be a rather less appealing choice than the apparatus of the state, which, whilst unanswerable in so many ways, is still constitutionally bound by the law of the land, where there is separation of the judiciary and the executive, and a system going back to Magna Carta, which most people would cherish as the cradle of democracy. An almost laughable proposition these days, but this is what people believe. It's definitely time for some fresh thinking on this. There is a very real need for rigorous public debate of the fundamental root of the system. While some people have rather a lot to lose, they really should have nothing to hide. Indeed, those of us give it to poring over report and accounts and so forth kind of know where to look, but regulation is both a sword and a shield, and human ingenuity will always seek to buck any system and find the loopholes. Accounting and reporting is sadly not exempt from this. Investment banks would not exist without loopholes, or indeed without their retail banks, or at least a belief at large that all banks are created equal. The public have been hoodwinked on the distinctions for too long. There are some very helpful explanations of all of this over on the Mensa website. Here is the link, should you be interested in a more cerebral analysis of the concepts and systems in play. So that's a comment I made in April 2011, and the Economania link should hopefully still work. Oh, right, okay, so that's Peston's blog from April 2011. Link works, and the comments are all still there. Wow, it's good. And then, right, let's just go to, right, right, Money Matters, article by Bill Cruz. Now, this is a brilliant article. Bill comments on positive money stuff. I've come across him in discussions with various people over the years. But this Money Matters article by Bill Cruz on Economania, which is the economics portal of Mensa, is really worth reading. And I'm just going to round off my journey here by sticking that at the end of the blog. And that will then be me signing out. Let's just start. There we go. There's the link. Oh, bugger. Paste. Link. Bosh, bosh, bosh. Oh, right, where are we? There it is. Let's just do this here. Oh, what are we doing? We're doing this. Just put that there by the link. Save. There you go. Add media. Upload file. open. Okay. Insert. There we are. And we can go update. View post. So let's just sign off with some Bill Cruz here. So have we frozen? No. Right. So when you get a loan from the bank, there's no actual transfer of funds. In fact, there's no loan, not as you or I would know it. The bank creates money as a deposit in your account. This is usually conditional upon your prior agreement to eventually hand over that new money to the same bank that created it, together with some more money too, interest. Most people have absolutely no idea this is how banking works. Much of this can be difficult to come to terms with. The idea that money is simply created out of thin air is alien to our way of thinking. I doubt this is accidental. My feeling is we're schooled this way deliberately so our thoughts won't stray towards grasping the true nature of the society imposed upon us. I've read the suggestion from Professor Henry C.K. Liu that when this gets properly understood, it will be as significant as grasping that the earth isn't flat or that it goes around the sun. I agree. I think the true dark ages are those we're living in now. Permission is granted to freely distribute this article for non-commercial purposes if attributed to Bill Cruz, unedited and copied in full, including this notice. There we are. There we are. And I'm just going to put that there. Over and out.